Special counsel Jack Smith has asked the federal judge overseeing specifically the election interference case against Donald Trump to cancel all upcoming court deadlines in a step toward dropping the case.
He'll be making a filing on December 2nd. Kind of an anticlimactic finish, it appears to be, for this massive effort that Jack Smith put together in these two cases.
Charging Donald J. Trump with felony violations of our national security laws, as well as participating in a conspiracy to obstruct justice. This indictment was voted by a grand jury of citizens in the Southern District of Florida, and I invite everyone to read it in full to understand the scope and the gravity of the crimes charged. The men and women of the United States intelligence community and our armed forces dedicate their lives to protecting our nation and its people.
Okay, so this is it, folks. The moment we've been building toward through weeks of coverage about collapsing witnesses, Supreme Court rulings, corruption files, and Pam Bondi's conviction. Special counsel Jack Smith just presented what legal observers are calling trembling evidence in open court, a comprehensive package of proof so overwhelming and so damning that Trump's legal team is in complete chaos, and the odds of conviction have gone from likely to virtually certain. We're talking about newly surfaced records that document Trump's direct involvement in criminal schemes. We're talking about audio recordings where Trump's actual voice is giving illegal orders and admitting corrupt intent. We're talking about insider testimony from people like Mark Meadows, who were in the room when Trump directed fake elector plots and obstruction campaigns. This isn't circumstantial evidence that requires inference or interpretation. This is direct proof of Trump personally committing felonies. His own words on tape, his own orders and memos, his own actions documented in digital audit trails that are impossible to dispute or explain away. The scene in the courtroom has been described as absolutely devastating, with Trump's defense attorneys caught completely off guard, scrambling and whispering frantically as each new piece of evidence lands, visibly shaken by how comprehensive and irrefutable Smith's case has become. Legal analysts who've covered major trials for decades are saying this is the strongest and most comprehensive package of evidence ever presented against a former president. The defense is struggling in real time to explain or contradict documentation that proves Trump directed illegal activities, ignored legal advice telling him those activities were crimes, and systematically worked to deceive federal authorities about what he was doing. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
Our laws that protect national defense information are critical for the safety and security of the United States, and they must be enforced. Violations of those laws put our country at risk. Adherence to the rule of law is a bedrock principle of the Department of Justice, and our nation's commitment to the rule of law sets an example for the world.
Now let's talk about who Jack Smith is and why his presentation of this evidence represents such a critical moment in Trump's prosecution. Smith is a career prosecutor with a reputation for building airtight cases against powerful defendants. He was appointed as special counsel specifically to investigate Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election and his mishandling of classified documents. Smith has been working methodically for months to gather evidence, flip witnesses, and build cases that would survive the aggressive legal challenges Trump's team was certain to mount. The evidence Smith is now presenting in court represents the culmination of that investigation. It's everything he's uncovered about Trump's criminal conduct, distilled into the most powerful and persuasive package possible. Smith isn't throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. He's presenting carefully curated evidence that proves each element of serious felony charges beyond reasonable doubt. The audio recordings of Trump instructing staff to ignore legal advice, to flip election results, and to keep criminal activities quiet are the centerpiece of Smith's case because they prove criminal intent directly from Trump's own mouth. When jurors hear Trump's voice telling subordinates to break laws and cover it up, that eliminates any possible good faith defense. You can't claim you thought you were acting legally when you're caught on tape telling people to ignore lawyers who are warning you that what you want to do is illegal. Here's what makes Smith's evidence presentation so uniquely powerful. It doesn't rely on any single type of proof, but instead combines multiple independent streams of evidence that all corroborate each other and tell the same story. The audio recordings prove Trump gave criminal orders. The memos from Mark Meadows and other insiders document when those orders were given and what context surrounded them. The digital audit trails show that Trump's orders were actually carried out. Documents were destroyed, false information was disseminated, illegal schemes were implemented. The testimony from cooperating witnesses explains the full scope of what was happening and connects Trump personally to every aspect of the criminal conspiracies. When you have this kind of multi-layered, mutually reinforcing evidence, defense attorneys have nowhere to go. They can't attack witness credibility when the witnesses are backed by recordings. They can't claim documents are forgeries when digital forensics prove their authenticity. They can't argue alternative explanations when Trump's own recorded words eliminate any interpretation other than criminal intent. Smith has essentially built a case that's designed to be bulletproof against every defense strategy Trump's team might attempt. The specific evidence about Trump directing fake elector schemes is particularly devastating because it proves Trump personally orchestrated one of the most serious aspects of his attempt to overturn the election. The fake elector plot involved creating fraudulent slates of electors in states Biden won and trying to submit those false electoral votes to Congress. This wasn't just Trump expressing opinions about election fraud. This was Trump actively directing a criminal conspiracy to defraud the United States and to obstruct an official proceeding. Smith's evidence shows Trump in meetings where the fake elector plan was discussed, Trump giving orders about how to implement it, Trump being briefed on its progress, and Trump continuing to push the scheme even after being told repeatedly by lawyers that it was illegal and unconstitutional. The memos that Meadows provided document Trump's direct involvement and his statements acknowledging the legal risks, but deciding to proceed anyway. The audio recordings capture Trump telling advisors to just get it done regardless of legality. The testimony from participants in the scheme explains that they were following Trump's explicit directions and that they understood they were engaged in criminal activity. This combination of evidence makes the fake elector charges essentially unbeatable at trial. Let's break down the systematic efforts to deceive federal authorities that Smith's evidence documents, because this represents some of the most serious criminal conduct Trump engaged in. The evidence shows that when investigators began looking into Trump's activities, he didn't just refuse to cooperate, he actively worked to obstruct investigations by destroying evidence, coordinating false testimony, and intimidating potential witnesses. Smith has audio of Trump discussing strategies for hiding documents that had been subpoenaed. He has memos showing Trump directed subordinates to delete records and to lie about what records existed. He has testimony from officials who participated in these obstruction schemes explaining that Trump personally ordered them to mislead investigators. The digital audit trails prove that documents were destroyed after preservation orders were issued, and that the destruction happened on systems Trump controlled or at times when Trump was giving direct orders. This isn't negligence or poor judgment. This is deliberate, sophisticated obstruction of justice that proves Trump knew his conduct was criminal and was willing to commit additional crimes to avoid accountability. The obstruction charges are often easier to prove than underlying crimes because they don't require establishing the merits of what was being investigated. You just have to show someone intentionally interfered with an investigation, which Trump's own words and actions on recordings clearly demonstrate. The corroboration that Mark Meadows provides for Smith's evidence cannot be overstated because Meadows was literally Trump's chief of staff and was present for virtually every key decision and conversation. When Meadows testifies that Trump gave specific illegal orders, and when Smith can then produce audio of those exact orders being given, the credibility is overwhelming. Meadows can explain the context and who else was in meetings, what alternatives were discussed, what legal advice was provided and rejected. He can authenticate documents by confirming he personally drafted them or witnessed Trump reviewing them. He can provide details about Trump's state of mind and intent by recounting conversations where Trump explicitly acknowledged he was breaking laws, but decided to do it anyway. Defense attorneys typically try to create doubt by attacking individual pieces of evidence or by suggesting witnesses are lying. But when you have a chief of staff corroborating audio recordings and documents, and when multiple other cooperating witnesses all tell the same story, the defense has no credible attack. The evidence is too comprehensive and too consistent across too many independent sources to be explained away as mistakes or fabrications. The contradiction of Trump's sworn statements that Smith's evidence reveals is going to result in additional perjury charges that further increase Trump's criminal exposure. Trump has testified in depositions and made statements in court filings under oath claiming he believed he won the election, that he acted in good faith based on that belief, and that he followed legal advice. But Smith's recordings and memos prove all of those sworn statements were lies. Trump is on tape admitting the election fraud claims weren't true. He's documented giving orders to ignore legal advice, telling him his plans were illegal. He's caught on audio, acknowledging he's pursuing strategies he knows are unlawful. Each of those contradictions between sworn testimony and recorded evidence is a potential perjury count. Perjury charges are powerful in prosecutions because they're straightforward to prove and because they demonstrate consciousness of guilt. Innocent people don't lie under oath about their conduct. The perjury charges also eliminate any sympathy Trump might otherwise get from jurors who might think he genuinely believed he was acting properly. You can't claim good faith when recordings prove you were lying in sworn testimony about your knowledge and intent. Let's talk about the courtroom dynamics and the scenes of Trump's defense team scrambling that observers are describing. Experienced trial attorneys are trained to maintain composure and project confidence even when things aren't going well. The fact that Trump's lawyers are visibly shaken and frantically whispering among themselves tells you they were completely unprepared for how strong Smith's evidence is. They apparently believed they had viable defenses or that they could at least create enough doubt to avoid conviction. But as Smith methodically presents recording after recording, memo after memo, testimony after testimony, it's becoming clear to Trump's attorneys that their defenses aren't going to work. The audio of Trump giving illegal orders destroys their argument that he was just following advice. The memos documenting Trump ignoring warnings eliminate the claim that he didn't know his conduct was improper. The testimony from multiple cooperators makes attacking witness credibility futile. Trump's lawyers are realizing in real time that they're watching their client get convicted, and there's nothing they can do to stop it. The scrambling and pivoting of strategy that observers describe suggests the defense team is having emergency consultations about whether to even continue with the trial or whether to start negotiating plea deals while there's still time to potentially get slightly more favorable terms. The judge's response to Smith's evidence presentation is also significant because judicial reactions provide insight into how strong the prosecution's case actually is. Judges see a lot of evidence across many cases and develop good instincts for distinguishing strong cases from weak ones. When a judge is allowing Smith to present all this evidence without significant defense objections being sustained, when the judge is showing interest and engagement rather than skepticism, those are signs that the court finds the evidence credible and powerful. Some judges in Trump cases have apparently made comments from the bench about the seriousness of the evidence being presented or about their concerns regarding the criminal conduct documented. While judges maintain neutrality and won't prejudge guilt, their handling of proceedings can reveal their assessment of whether the prosecution has met its burden. The fact that Trump's team isn't successfully keeping evidence out or successfully challenging Smith's presentation suggests the judge views Smith's case as solid and that Trump's objections lack merit. That creates momentum in the courtroom where the prosecution is dominating and the defense is on its heels throughout. The political reverberations from Smith's evidence presentation are already being felt as Republicans accelerate their exodus from Trump and as media coverage shifts from whether Trump will face accountability to what his conviction and sentencing will look like. When the evidence against Trump is this overwhelming and this public, presented in open court where everyone can see it, defending Trump becomes essentially impossible without looking like you're defending known criminal conduct. Republican leaders who were trying to carefully navigate between not completely abandoning Trump and not fully endorsing him now have no choice but to break completely because the evidence of Trump's crimes is undeniable. Media coverage of the trial is dominating headlines with daily updates about new revelations from Smith's evidence. Each audio clip that gets played in court becomes a news cycle unto itself as analysts dissect what Trump's words prove about his criminal intent. The cumulative impact of weeks or months of this kind of negative coverage with dramatic courtroom scenes is going to destroy whatever microscopic amount of public support Trump had left. Even Trump's most loyal supporters are going to struggle to maintain their belief in his innocence when they can hear his own recorded voice admitting to criminal conduct. So, where does Smith's presentation of trembling evidence leave Trump in terms of his ability to avoid conviction and imprisonment? The harsh reality is that Trump has essentially no chance of acquittal at this point because the evidence Smith has presented is simply too strong to overcome. When your own recorded statements prove you committed crimes, when your own chief of staff testifies you directed criminal conspiracies, when digital forensics prove you destroyed evidence and obstructed investigations, there's no defense strategy that works. Trump's attorneys know this, which is why they're scrambling and visibly shaken in court. Their only realistic option now is damage control, trying to negotiate plea deals that might result in slightly reduced sentences, trying to limit the number of charges Trump gets convicted on, trying to preserve appeals issues that might give them long-shot chances at overturning convictions later. But the fundamental reality is that Trump is going to be convicted of serious felonies. He's going to face substantial prison time, and there's nothing his legal team can do at this point to prevent those outcomes. The only questions remaining are how many convictions, how much total prison time, and whether Trump serves sentences concurrently or consecutively across multiple cases. The tipping point in prosecution that legal experts are identifying refers to this moment when the evidence becomes so overwhelming that the question shifts from whether conviction will happen to what conviction means for American democracy and rule of law. Smith's evidence presentation represents that tipping point, the moment when even Trump's defenders have to acknowledge that he committed serious crimes and will face serious consequences. This shift in the national conversation is profound because it means accountability mechanisms have successfully overcome the political obstacles that often shield powerful figures from consequences. The precedent being established is that presidents can be prosecuted and convicted for criminal conduct, that the evidence required to convict is achievable even for defendants with enormous resources, and that the judicial system can successfully handle prosecutions of this magnitude and importance. Future presidents are now on notice that criminal conduct will result in prison time regardless of political power or connections. That's a fundamental strengthening of rule of law and democratic accountability that will shape American governance for generations. Let's talk about what happens after Trump's conviction when he faces sentencing across multiple cases. Federal sentencing guidelines for the charges Trump faces: conspiracy to defraud the United States, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, perjury, carry substantial prison terms, especially when multiple counts are involved and when aggravating factors are present. Trump's abuse of his position as president, his sophisticated methods of committing crimes, his attempts to obstruct investigations, and his complete lack of remorse are all aggravating factors that will result in sentences at the high end of guidelines. We're realistically looking at Trump potentially receiving sentences totaling decades in prison. Even if some sentences run concurrently, Trump could easily face 10 to 20 years in federal prison, which at his age amounts to a de facto life sentence. The judge will consider his age and health, but those factors might not result in significant leniency given the severity of his crimes and the need to send a message that even presidents face harsh consequences for serious criminal conduct. Trump's entire remaining life could be spent in federal custody, and that reality is finally setting in for Trump and everyone around him as Smith's evidence makes conviction inevitable. The collapse of Trump's defense that we're witnessing in real time is going to have ripple effects for everyone else who participated in Trump's criminal schemes. Every Trump associate who was involved in fake elector plots, obstruction activities, or witness tampering is watching Smith's evidence presentation and realizing that if Trump can't beat charges with the evidence Smith has, then they certainly can't beat their own charges. This realization is going to drive more cooperation as associates race to cut deals before it's too late. Each new cooperating witness provides additional evidence that strengthens cases against remaining defendants, which drives more cooperation in a cascade effect. The Trump criminal enterprise is completely collapsing with everyone involved either convicted, cooperating, or desperately trying to negotiate favorable deals. The scope of accountability is going to be massive, with potentially dozens of convictions stemming from Smith's investigations and related prosecutions. The message being sent is clear. Participating in presidential criminal schemes will result in prison time for everyone involved, not just the president. The era of accountability for high office that Smith's prosecution represents could fundamentally transform American politics by establishing that the presidency is not above the law. For decades, there's been debate about whether sitting presidents could be indicted and whether former presidents could be prosecuted for official acts. Those questions have now been definitively answered through Trump's prosecution. Presidents are subject to criminal law. They can be prosecuted after leaving office, and the evidence required to convict them is achievable. This transformation strengthens democracy by ensuring that no individual is so powerful that they can commit crimes without facing consequences. It reinforces that the rule of law applies equally to everyone, regardless of position or political power. Future presidents will be more constrained by law because they'll know criminal conduct will result in prosecution and imprisonment. Political movements will be less likely to tolerate criminal behavior from their leaders because the consequences will be too severe. The cultural shift this represents From accepting that powerful people often escape accountability to expecting that even presidents will go to prison for crimes is profound and lasting. Here's the bottom line as we conclude analysis of what might be the final nail in the coffin of Trump's defense and freedom. Jack Smith has presented trembling evidence in court, including audio recordings of Trump giving illegal orders, memos documenting his direction of criminal conspiracies, digital audit trails proving obstruction, and testimony from insiders like Mark Meadows corroborating every allegation. The evidence is the strongest and most comprehensive ever presented against a former president and makes conviction virtually certain. Trump's defense team is visibly scrambling and shaken as they realize their defenses won't work against overwhelming proof. The courtroom scenes reveal the collapse of Trump's case, happening in real time as each piece of evidence lands. Trump faces guaranteed conviction on multiple serious felonies that will result in substantial prison time, potentially measured in decades. The political reverberations are accelerating Trump's total isolation as the undeniable nature of his crimes becomes impossible to defend. The tipping point has been reached where accountability is no longer a question but an inevitability. Trump's sentencing across multiple cases will likely result in him spending the rest of his life in prison. The collapse of his defense is driving more cooperation from associates as everyone involved realizes conviction is certain. The era of accountability being established through Smith's prosecution will fundamentally transform how presidents understand their obligations under law. The precedent that even presidents go to prison for crimes will shape American democracy for generations. We're watching the dramatic climax of a prosecution that proves rule of law can successfully constrain even the most powerful figures when the evidence of their crimes is overwhelming and when prosecutors like Jack Smith have the courage and skill to present that evidence effectively. Keep watching because the final chapters of Trump's legal saga are playing out right now, with his conviction becoming more certain every day as more evidence surfaces and as his remaining defenses crumble under the weight of proof that cannot be explained away or overcome.